The day will come when we will name names other than Sean Combs, and there's a lot of names. It's a long list already. And of course, I already know who some of these individuals are, but because of the nature of this case.
More than 200 previously redacted names linked to Jeffrey Epstein have been made public tonight.
A federal judge ordered the unredacted documents to be released last month. Natalie is back with more details on who is named.
Everyone's talking about the similarities of Sean Combs and Jeffrey Epstein and their sex trafficking ring. On the surface, they seem totally different, right?
We all know that Diddy did not act alone. The question is, with whom? As this bombshell trial continues, more secrets are getting uncovered. And now, words on the streets are saying that Diddy's alleged connection to the one and only Jeffrey Epstein is finally under the spotlight, and boy, oh boy, Puff lost it. Because if you thought the Diddy trial was just about parties and Cassie's lawsuit, think again. What we're about to break down is something way bigger. We're talking mob ties, CIA private prisons, music industry blackmail, and yes, a web that directly connects Sean Diddy Combs to Jeffrey Epstein and his infamous Epstein list. And the crazy part? According to journalist Whitney Webb, Diddy was never the boss. He was the puppet, just like Epstein was controlled by someone bigger and much more sinister. Let's get into it. Now, to truly and fully grasp the situation, we have to take a time machine and rewind the clock to the rise of bad boy records in the 90s. Yup, before all these lawsuits came flooding in, Diddy used to be one of the biggest and most respected names in the industry. And that's no secret. Back then, everyone saw Diddy as this flashy, ambitious executive with parties, music videos, and flashy suits. But behind all the glitz was a shadowy network pulling the strings. This is where Whitney Webb enters the photo. In case you don't know her, her explosive article, One Label Under Blackmail, laid it all out, and the details are wild. So wild, we had to go full on this breakdown.
And an author who Whitney Webb wrote 2 books called One Nation Under Blackmail. She did so much investigative journalism on this topic that she had to do a volume 1 and a volume 2. The first one is between the intelligence and crime that gave rise to Jeffrey Epstein, and the second one is around how organized crime gave rise to Jeffrey Epstein.
Now, let me warn you, it's a deep rabbit hole, explaining and trying to make sense of how Diddy managed to create such a horrible system of abuse that spanned for years. First things first, Diddy didn't rise alone. His success was engineered, propped up by major players in the music industry like Clive Davis, Andre Harrell, and Russell Simmons. Take note, these weren't just music moguls. They were deeply connected to criminal enterprises, blackmail systems, and alleged government fronts, which adds another layer of mystery to this whole story. Okay, let's start with Clive Davis, a man seen as a legendary exec, but behind the scenes, he was accused of embezzlement and money laundering at CBS Records. Now, at this point, you can already spot the similarities, right? Well, stick around, because the more we get into Diddy and Jeffrey, the more everything will make sense. Now, the feds were sniffing around, and Davis got fired. But just a year later, boom, he's back running Arista like nothing happened. How? Here's where it starts getting suspicious. According to Whitney Webb, Clive Davis operated like a madman in the industry. Documents link his associate, Dave Winshaw, to laundering money and using false invoices to fund drugs and prostitutes for CBS parties. Winshaw was even called Clive's pimp. Think about that. And it doesn't end there.
How to do this kind of stuff. What do you mean no man wakes up one day? Somebody had to teach you on how to bribe and do this and hold people hostage and da-da-da-da-da.
When Davis brought Diddy into the Arista Bad Boy venture, people like Suge Knight claimed it wasn't just business. Suge alleged that Davis, Russell Simmons, and Andre Harrell used drugs and did intimate things with Diddy. And what happened next? Diddy allegedly learned the game and used the same tactics on the next generation. Now, these are not made-up details, because people who worked for Diddy had exposed his dirty little secret. According to Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, the mogul started recording everything back in the early 90s for blackmail purposes. Where'd he learn that? Whitney Webb says, Clive Davis. These weren't just tapes for memories. These were leveraged. Now, if y'all still don't believe, let's jump to Cassie's testimonies on the ongoing Diddy trial. Yup, the trial that's shaking Hollywood at this very moment. And what Cassie said on that witness stand? It was chilling. She wasn't just talking about controlling behavior or toxic relationships, no. Cassie told the court that Diddy filmed her over and over again, against her will. And those tapes? They weren't for memories. They were used as leverage. Straight up blackmail.
Combs would later threaten to release the recordings to blackmail her, she said on the stand.
Cassie detailed how Diddy forced her into what she described as freak-offs, those now infamous parties full of drugs, escorts, and degrading acts. But here's where it gets dark. She testified that Diddy didn't just watch these events unfold, he filmed them. And guess who was the star of that twisted show? Cassie. She said Diddy would replay the footage to humiliate her, to remind her who was in control, to threaten her as if saying, "Don't forget what I have on you." Imagine being trapped in a relationship where your worst traumas are being used as ammo. That's what Cassie described, and she wasn't the only one. According to insiders in the courtroom, Cassie's team presented chilling details about how Diddy had a full catalog of tapes. Dozens of victims, all filmed during freak-offs. These weren't just trophy videos, they were files for extortion, tools to silence anyone who might step out of line or speak up. But wait, there's more, because just recently, Diddy's former assistant took the stand and dropped another bombshell testimony. One that totally backs up Cassie's earlier statement and Diddy's alleged controlling schemes that might be connected to those of Clive and Jeffrey. Mia, the former assistant who's now being referred to as one of the key witnesses in the trafficking case, didn't just describe physical and emotional abuse. She said Diddy weaponized information against her, like straight up threatening her life and career if she ever dared to defy him. We're talking full-blown psychological warfare.
She said Combs really was in charge of her life. When she stayed with him at his house, she was not allowed to lock her bedroom door, and that goes to one of her allegations. She has alleged on the stand that Sean Combs assaulted her on more than one occasion. She also said he physically, by throwing things at her.
Pretty much the same tactic he allegedly did to his other victims, Cassie included. At one point, Mia testified that Diddy threatened to tell Cassie, his girlfriend at the time, that they had slept together. And whether that encounter was consensual or not is unclear, but the way Diddy allegedly used it is. That's Blackmail 101. According to Mia, he leveraged the threat of exposing her just to keep her under his thumb. All while she was trapped overseas, working on a project with Cassie, waking up to 48 missed calls and rage texts like, "Call me now," sent 7 times in a row. And then this one, "If you don't call me now, at all, I'ma tell everything. You have 2 minutes." That's not a boss texting an assistant. That's a man on a power trip. A man who knows your secrets, holds your career in the palm of his hand, and threatens to burn it all down unless you comply. But Diddy didn't stop there. He allegedly told Mia he'd cancel her television deal with ABC, a deal about an assistant working for a powerful figure, just like her. Ironic, right? He dangled her dreams in front of her just to yank them away as punishment. Like, "You want a future? Do exactly what I say." And y'all, Mia believed him. She told the court she was scared, that Diddy would destroy her reputation, fire her, or worse, expose things that could ruin her life. Also, let's not forget the yacht story. New Year's Eve in St. Bart's, she was counting money from Diddy's safe, a task she was taking too long on, and he kicked her off the boat, told her, and I quote, "You better learn to walk on water like Jesus, bitch." That's how disposable she was to him. All because she didn't move fast enough for the man who thinks he's untouchable. However, that's not the worst of it because the next request was totally impossible, and yet he expected Mia to do it. Now, even when she escaped to shore, Diddy demanded she come back, and when she returned, he told her she had to fly with him to Vegas or she'd be fired on the spot. That level of control is terrifying, and Mia said it best, he would have destroyed her if she didn't obey. Now, you might be wondering, where's the connection? Well, in case you missed it, Jeffrey also did pretty nasty stuff to women under his authority. He pretty much used his power to control them in the palm of his hand, making them do things they shouldn't do. treating them like nothing and making them fear for their life every single day. But wait, it gets darker because here's where it loops back into the bigger conspiracy. Remember what we said earlier about Diddy learning the blackmail game from Clive Davis? Whitney Webb even mentioned that Diddy started recording everything as early as 1992. Like, this wasn't a phase, it was a strategy. One was taught to him by the very people now trying to erase their names from the scandal. Cassie's testimony is crucial because it reveals that Diddy didn't operate on impulse. He operated with a system of control. And that system mirrors exactly what Epstein did. Record, exploit, blackmail, repeat. So no, Diddy wasn't just throwing wild parties, he was collecting insurance policies. And now that the tapes are being mentioned in court, the people he protected and the ones who protected him are starting to sweat. Now let's talk about Diddy's former bad boy co-founder, Kirk Burroughs. Kirk accused Diddy of repeated sexual harassment and said he was pressured into degrading acts during business meetings. Lawsuits were filed, but Diddy always came out clean. Why? Because according to Whitney, Diddy wasn't the mastermind. He was protected, just like Epstein. Now here's the real kicker. The very network behind Clive Davis, Whitney Webb says it overlaps directly with the one behind Epstein. Let's break that down. At the top of this triangle, you've got guys like Leslie Wexner, the billionaire behind Victoria's Secret, who funded Epstein's rise.
Was Jeffrey Epstein's biggest client, and he gave Jeffrey Epstein access to all of his wealth and was also gifted the New York mansion by Les Wexner. Les has never had to answer to his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, so this subpoena will give us a lot of new information.
There were rumors for years that Wexner was Epstein's sugar daddy, that he financed Epstein's empire in exchange for something deeper. Power, control, exploitation? Now zoom back into music. Arista, Clive Davis, MCA Records, all of them linked to organized crime. In fact, Whitney calls MCA the Mob Corporation of America. And the man behind MCA? Lew Wasserman, a Hollywood mogul, Clinton Foundation donor, and allegedly deeply tied to the CIA. Yeah, you heard that right? The Central Intelligence Agency. In fact, in a FOIA request submitted by journalist Dennis McDougal, the CIA admitted to working with MCA, but they refused to release the docs, claiming it would endanger national security. Now, why would a record label threaten national security? Well, we need to take a detour into the 1990s in order to explain that. In a chilling account from a former industry insider, a secret meeting was held where top music execs were invited to a mansion and told to sign NDAs. Once inside, they were told something shocking. Their companies had invested in private prisons. And to keep those prisons profitable, they needed those beds filled. How? By promoting criminal behavior in music, specifically gangsta rap. At this point, it's a pattern of control and corruption, and by the looks of it, these operations have been in the industry for years and are just getting exposed now. It was alleged that executives were told to push artists who glorified violence, drugs, and street life, because the more crime, the more arrests. And the more arrests, the more money those private prisons made. Let that sink in. Now, guess who had ties to those same execs? Diddy, Russell Simmons, Clive Davis, and others who were also connected to Epstein's backers. This wasn't just about music. This was social engineering. And it gets darker. While Diddy was becoming the poster child of hip-hop, behind him was a blackmail-fueled operation. Whitney Webb draws a direct line between Diddy's rise and the people funding Epstein, using drugs, and compromise to control artists, executives, and politicians. Need more proof? Suge Knight said it himself. He claimed that Jimmy Iovine, the head of Interscope, told him that Diddy and Clive Davis had an arrangement, mutual favors in exchange for power. And it mirrors the sugar daddy dynamic between Epstein and Wexner. Coincidence? Not likely.
He the fall guy right now. It's not one celebrity that he hung with is speaking up for him. Snoop and Puffy was so close. Closer than most.
Really?
They would do things together and party together and do things that it was uncomfortable for two men to be that way.
But this isn't just about who slept with whom. It's about control. If you've got someone on tape doing something shameful, illegal, or both, you own them. And that's exactly how this network operated. Now let's go international. Back in the 60s, a lawyer named Alvin Malnick set up the Bank of Commerce in the Bahamas. Mob money poured in, hundreds of millions. From there, it moved to the International Credit Bank of Switzerland and then right back into the U.S. This system was allegedly used by Tibor Rosenbaum, a key Israeli intelligence financier. Rosenbaum also had connections to Epstein's mentor, Leslie Wexner. Same players, same laundering routes. Whitney Webb suggests that this financial system, set up by mob and intelligence networks, was also backing major entertainment projects, labels, and artists. So now we've got blackmail, trafficking, CIA fronts, mob money, and prison profiteering, all intersecting at Bad Boy Records, Epstein's empire, and the same circle of billionaires. Still think it's just a hip-hop issue? And don't forget the Clinton connection. Bill Clinton and MCA mogul Lew Wasserman were tight.
Hey, Sandra. So 29 documents were just released in the past hour, over 400 pages. We're going through it as quickly as we can. And once again, names in the Clinton family have come up. So, of course, these names coming out as part of a 2015 defamation lawsuit.
Lew Wasserman backed Clinton's presidential run and scored overnight stays at the White House. His foundation donated big to the Clinton Foundation. Lew Wasserman's grandson, Casey, an Epstein associate. That's not all. Brothman and Lew Wasserman, who controlled parts of the entertainment monopoly, pushed Clinton to sign the 1996 Telecommunications Act. That bill let a handful of corporations control all radio and TV outlets, making it easier to push any message, any artist, any agenda. And who benefited from all this? Going more specific, we are talking about the same companies tied to Epstein and the very same companies profiting from prison labor, like Walmart and Microsoft. Now, there's no doubt that everything was all part of the machine. Back to Diddy. Whitney Webb points out that Diddy's meteoric rise wasn't just due to talent or hustle, it was sponsored, protected, weaponized. Now, people are saying that Diddy was made to do this. Basically, he was trained in blackmail, was surrounded by handlers, and while he tried to build his empire, he was still answering to the people behind the curtain. So, when did he throw his infamous parties? When freak-offs happened? When allegations of trafficking, coercion, and abuse surfaced? He was following a blueprint laid out by Clive Davis, a network run by shadow billionaires and a system mirrored by Epstein and Wexner. And now? Just like Epstein, Diddy's taking the fall. But get this, Diddy is not falling alone. Just like Epstein, there is also an alleged Diddy list.
The feds have made it clear in their indictment that not only did he allegedly commit evil villain-level offenses, but Diddy wasn't acting alone. And when asked whether any other arrests would be made in this case, this is what the prosecuting attorney, Damian Williams, had to say.
Yep, you heard that right. A growing list of celebrities, billionaires, and power players who were regulars at Diddy's parties on his private jets or spotted at his infamous freak-offs. And now, they're pulling a disappearing act worthy of an Oscar. The second those raids hit Diddy's LA and Miami homes and that private jet of his was spotted in Antigua, the calls went out. PR teams were scrambling. Suddenly, people who partied with Diddy years ago, who showed up to his white parties, toasted champagne with him at award shows, even called him family, they went dead silent. We're seeing the Hollywood cleanup crew at work. One moment you're popping bottles with Puff. The next, you're re-evaluating past associations. Celebrities are hitting that unfollow button, issuing vague, "we had no idea" statements, or pretending they never knew the man. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly what happened when Epstein went down. When Epstein was arrested, the rich and powerful who once smiled in pictures with him, like Bill Gates, Naomi Campbell, and even Prince Andrew, raced to cut ties. Now, the same pattern is playing out with Diddy, only this time it's unfolding live on Instagram and X. One insider even claimed that entire teams of attorneys and crisis managers were hired overnight just to scrub connections to Diddy from online bios, event footage, and press releases. And remember that infamous 2019 50th birthday bash Diddy threw? The one with every A-lister in the game under one roof? Yeah, folks are now pretending they RSVP'd no. We're talking actors, rappers, producers, executives, suddenly all trying to erase their footprints. And it gets deeper. Word on the street is that prosecutors have already started asking questions about who attended what party, who was where, and more importantly, who knew what. So when we say Diddy list, we're not just talking about guests, we're talking about potential witnesses, people who may have seen things, heard things, and said nothing. Because of this, people are claiming that this ain't just about bad press anymore, it's about self-preservation. Because just like with Epstein, when one domino falls, the whole circle of silence starts to shake. And you best believe Hollywood is panicking. It's like a full circle. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't some genius predator operating alone. He was the face of a machine built on control, manipulation, and exploitation. A cog in the same engine that elevated Diddy. Now, think about it. There are a ton of similarities between Diddy and Jeffrey. Both rose to prominence fast, surrounded themselves with celebrities, models, and young talent. The two of them also had mysterious finances, were protected for decades, and suddenly, they weren't. When did the heat come? The system needed a fall guy. And now, with Whitney Webb's reporting, Cassie's lawsuit, and all the victims going after Diddy with their testimony, we're seeing that it's not just a coincidence. Speaking of testimonies, we need to jump back and dissect what Diddy's former assistant laid in court. Because on top of the blackmail and toxic workplace environment, Mia revealed a much sinister situation, one that will strengthen Diddy's connection to Epstein. Now, Mia worked for Diddy from 2009 to 2017, starting at just 25 years old, and in that time, she says she experienced an unimaginable level of abuse. Mia described a work environment that blurred the line between psychological torture and physical violence. She told the court that Diddy assaulted her both physically and sexually repeatedly over the years. He's thrown things at me. He's thrown me against the wall. He's thrown me into a pool. He's thrown an ice bucket on my head. He's slammed my arm into a door, and he's sexually assaulted me, she said. That's not just a toxic boss. That's a predator hiding behind a billionaire status. She said there were days when Diddy treated her like a confidant, like a business partner. But then there were other days when she said he'd treat her like a worthless piece of crap. That was the phrase she used. And the contrast wasn't just emotional manipulation, it was control. Pure, calculated control.
Well, Diddy's dead eyes have come up yet again in the trial, and today, the next witness to take the stand, her name is Mia, and she went on to talk about how his eyes were really dark and how scary of a person he was, and she said, and I quote, his eyes turned like black and there was no getting through.
But the most disturbing part? Mia testified that he raped her. In her words, it was the most shameful thing of my life. And when she said that, she could barely get the words out. She whispered through tears. The courtroom was dead silent. She told the jury she lived in constant fear of being hurt, fear of being destroyed professionally. I didn't want to die or get hurt, she said. And the control Diddy had over her, it was so intense that she even said, I couldn't tell him no, like about a sandwich. I couldn't tell him no about anything. She explained that even pushing back on the smallest thing would have marked her as a threat, and that would have made her a target. And this isn't some isolated allegation. This lines up with everything we've heard about Diddy's alleged behavior. Manipulation, blackmail, and control. Just like with Cassie, just like with other employees, Diddy allegedly built a world where saying no wasn't just hard, it was dangerous. Just think about how evil a man he is. But now, thinking about the alleged link between Puff and Epstein, people are thinking, if they were this bad, how bad are their real bosses? Because just like what I've mentioned, Puff and Jeffrey are not the head of the snake. So what does that mean for us? It means the people we idolize, the execs, the moguls, the billionaires, aren't always who they say they are. And the ones who get sacrificed? They were never really in charge. Just like Epstein, Diddy might be going down. But the real puppet masters, they're still behind the curtain. Now, let's think about it. There is no denying that Jeffrey Epstein and Diddy have something in common. They built their empires out of crime and blackmail. They exploit young women and serve the powerful elites in Hollywood and even politics. They are masters of trafficking and even make people's lives miserable. It's truly hard to deny at this point. And looking at Diddy now, you can say that he is indeed falling like the infamous Jeffrey Epstein. But again, this is only the beginning. Who knows what connections we are about to uncover as this trial moves forward. Now, what do you guys think? Are Diddy and Jeffrey Epstein connected, and is someone bigger pulling the strings? Let us know in the comments and make sure to stick around for more updates.